What's up, everybody? We are back. John Delarose here, delarose.com. That's DELARROZ.com. I am a #1 best-selling comic creator and award-winning comic creator. I've got my link to my books in the description below, as well as my newsletter, so please check those out, support the channel, and support our effort in comics. If you like my takes, or if you don't like my takes, you might like my books anyway. Appreciate everybody who does so. All right, this is Daredevil by Brubaker and Lark, Omnibus Volume 1. I've been reading through Daredevil since last year, the start of the pandemic here, and I started with the run of epic collections that came out towards the end of the first volume. And what they did is Daredevil went on hiatus for a while, then they relaunched it with Kevin Smith and Joe Quesada. There's an omnibus of that. And then Brian Michael Bendis took over from there, and 2 omnibuses of that, and this is the Brubaker one. Now, the Brubaker omnibuses are very thin. They are smaller compared to most omnibuses. This is actually about the size of an epic collection at coming in at 24 issues from issues 82 to 105. So, and the second one's even smaller than this, which I have not gotten to reading yet, but I'm excited to. I would really recommend, for those who are reading, to read the Marvel Knights by Quesada Omnibus first, because there's a big event in that sets this up. And if you are looking to avoid spoilers, I guess I would say go to that first and don't watch this video. And then I would also read the Bendis volumes before this as well. As much as I think this is a better writing in general than Bendis, it relies on the setup. What happens in the Bendis and in that Joe Quesada one really impacted this to such a degree that you cannot really read it without those. I guess you can, but as a new-time Daredeviler, you know, it's difficult just because of where it starts. And we'll get into that in a second. All right, there's your spoiler warning. Got a pretty cool art on the inside. I really love when they do this. You get these beautiful art on the inside without the dust jacket. You get a nice red paper cover to start. And an introduction by Brian Michael Bendis, who talks about this run. And this is the art from the last cover. So where this starts off is at the end of Bendis' run, Daredevil is thrown in jail, and everybody knows who Matt Murdock is, and Kingpin's thrown in jail. They're both in trouble together. And Brubaker really sets this up. You don't know what's going on. There's an alternate Daredevil hanging out there while Matt Murdock's sitting in jail. I love the art. Lark's art is just really beautiful noir stuff. You know, it's very, in a lot of ways, it's a little different because it's a little more detailed, and the coloring is a little different than what we see from the typical Brubaker-Sean Phillips collaborations, but it's still in that vein quite a bit. Now, one thing about Brubaker is he does have a lot of talking scenes, and you got to get through those in order to get to what's going on. This is a very odd story to start off a run with. Like I said, if you started here, like, there's not much superheroics going on. There's not much fighting and Daredevil stuff going on. It's an odd read, but it feels very crime noir. There's a warden who's kind of a little corrupt. There's FBI agents who are kind of corrupt. And they're all trying to set up Matt Murdock to just get killed in Riker Island prison, basically. And Foggy's trying to stop that on the lawyer side. Very cool stuff. Murdock ends up, you know, in these prison fights a couple of times here. And it just progressively gets more interesting as the Kingpin shows up. And Foggy looks like he gets killed in prison there as he visits Matt Murdock because the guards aren't doing the best job. And Matt Murdock then starts an investigation on like who is responsible for the killing. And it gets darker and darker. It looks like Matt Murdock's going crazy through the course of this and just beating the crap out of the owl. We see that Bullseye is getting thrown into the prison, so it's going to get even more dangerous. It's really a bleak setup. And, you know, if you're a fan of like the Frank Miller Daredevil, where it's dark and edgy and all that, you're going to like this. It can get a little too dark, and I don't like things typically too dark in my superhero comics. It doesn't make me feel good. But Brubaker does such an excellent job, and such an excellent job with the characters and the setup and the mysteries and just the tense moments. I mean, even these like talking scenes with Wilson Fisk are just like so tense. That's beautiful. And the art's just so phenomenal. I just love looking at this. Here's Frank Castle sitting in a diner finding out what's going on. And you see at the end of this issue, Frank Castle's just like, he sets himself up so he goes to prison intentionally. And that's great. And so it gets really interesting as we see Frank Castle and Matt Murdock just sitting in prison. And Frank kind of is like, he gives him this talk, like, you don't want to end up like me. You know, you've got a different moral compass. It's very interesting. I would have loved to see a Brubaker Punisher just based on what I saw here. Kingpin tries to make a deal with Daredevil, and he kind of knows that Matt Murdock is in this spot where he's going to have to. And they end up formulating a prison break together, while the rest of the prison is actually trying to kill both Fisk and Murdock with their sheer numbers. And so Kingpin has enlisted Bullseye to help them get out of there. And it gets crazy. So it's really fun. And this is all in the first arc. Eventually he does get out, obviously, and then he starts to have his, you know, typical superhero fight with the other Daredevil, who it turns out is Iron Fist. And Iron Fist is under the employ of somebody else because he's a hero for hire. And Matt Murdock's trying to figure out who is all responsible for this stuff. We get a little vignette of Foggy Nelson, who we learn now is in protective custody. And Elektra is kind of looking after him there. And Murdock goes to, you can see the change just in like the tone. It's interesting, you got the black borders all around here. But once we get into, oh, what did they do that for? That's very interesting and kind of weird. So if you look at the black borders here, they put black borders around this entire first arc. But there are the white gutters all the way around. So it's like they didn't upsize the pages to the omnibuses, and then they upsized the pages to the omnibus size going forward here. I don't know why they did that. It's kind of odd, unless this was done in the comic book this way. That's very, very bizarre kind of thing to note. So Murdock ends up going after this like femme fatale in Monaco, who's tied to this attorney who's kind of manipulating the strings and all that. We get a new Matador. Matador is a classic character, but this one is shown to be a little more brutal. Very cool stuff. Oh my gosh. So we finally get some superheroics out of this. Daredevil's on this chase in Europe and trying to find out who was the person who set up this whole Foggy killing. We get a fight with Gravestone. Lots of nice villains that you don't get to see very often thrown into this. And there's this girl who's like kind of partially behind this all and setting things up with this new Matador. And she's got a weird power where like she has pheromones that just makes guys go crazy. And so through this, as Matt Murdock's kind of figuring this out, he knows she kind of reminds him of Karen Page, and that makes him go crazy a little bit. And he rescues her, but he finds out he's being betrayed, and he finds out the whole situation was being set up by Wilson Fisk's wife, who is like dying of cancer now. And she just wanted to screw him on her way out the door. So, womp womp. She became evil, even though she wasn't really in that way before. It is set up by Brubaker very well on how this is done and how that character changed to be this maniacal. So, really tragic and really dark. And that's what you get out of this. When he comes back, he gets cleared of all of his charges, and like, you know, they say that maybe he isn't Daredevil to the press because he'd been outed before. And then, because of what happened with Vanessa Fisk, he ends up, as the attorney, getting Wilson Fisk out of prison as well, and getting those charges dropped. And then the girl from the femme fatale stuff in Europe comes back, and that sets up the next storyline. So that we get a filler issue again, and this is a beautiful filler issue. So this one has a cover by John Romita Sr., one of the original Marvel artists, and if you look at this, it's got that classic feel to it. You know, you get the little romance tropes in here, and I love this. This made me so happy just to see this one piece of art. Like, I would have bought this omnibus almost for this. So Daredevil had a woman who he was married to through all this, and she is blind and has problems too. And man, the arc for her just gets really rough over the course of this. It made me feel squeamish, I gotta tell you. But she's got an issue where she's kind of pining over Daredevil, is what happens, and you kind of just set that up, and that sets up the character for the next issues too. So there's something weird going on. The Gladiator has kind of turned good at this point, but he's going bad again, and he's escaped from prison and just killing people. And he's like, he doesn't remember why. Once the moment's over, he's like not sure what's going on. And this sets up a mystery for the rest of the whole deal here. Art's super consistent throughout this. Super good stuff. Daredevil kind of hunting this down, and he finds out that like there's this guy, Mr. Fear, who's like chemically screwing these people, basically. And this happened to his wife, too. So the Gladiator gets in with his wife at one point, and she gets screwed up in the head to where she ends up killing a dude by just pushing on the subway by mistake. And it's ugly. So that felt terrible. And she ends up going through this like severe mental crisis because she's on these like fear drugs that have like altered her, and it needs a antidote. And so Mr. Fear is just trying to break down Daredevil. And we're in the issue 100 now. In the issue 100, there's all these different artists who came in and did just a few pages here and there, because Daredevil ends up on this fear drug and he starts to like hallucinate. So all the hallucinations, it's a pretty standard 100 issue or milestone issue where he fights all the villains in his head or whatnot and remembers all of the past. So, you know, I find that a cheesy thing. I get why they do it, but that's kind of skippable stuff for me. But he comes back to it and he starts investigating this, trying to figure out how to find Mr. Fear, how to stop him while his life slowly breaks down again, much like it broke down in Bendis's run, culminating with him in prison. And he finally, at the end of the book, of course, stops Mr. Fear and gets his lady off the charges, but she's been hit with some other stuff through the course of this. And that's that. So he knows he ruined her life. She's all messed up still. And it ends with Mr. Fear in prison. Okay, so this is about a little over halfway through the run, and it's just exciting stuff all the way. I really can't wait to start the next volume. I'm so excited about this. It's really dark. It does depend on the setup of those other books, like I said, and that's kind of the flaws of it. It doesn't really stand on its own in that regard. But just the way these stories flow and the character development throughout all this stuff is just beautiful, beautiful comics. I love the art. I love the noir feel. It's just, I don't know. I love everything by Brubaker. I really do. So it's a 9 out of 10 in my book. I'm excited for the conclusion. And thank you all for watching. Leave a comment what you think about this and hit that like and subscribe button. We'll be back soon.